When my phone lit up with my father's name for the 5th time that morning, I knew exactly what he wanted. "No, how are you?" "No, I'm proud of you. Just a cold demand. You will attend your sister's wedding, or forget about college. We're done paying." He thought I'd panic, that I'd crawl back like I always did. What he didn't know, I had already graduated from one of the top universities in the country, with honors, on a full scholarship. While they thought I was just wasting away at community college, I was secretly building a life they never imagined I could have without them. I had a 6-figure job, my own apartment, and 0 debt. They had no control over me anymore. So I booked a first-class flight home, not to beg, not to obey, but to expose the truth they refused to see. They wanted me at that wedding, fine, but I wasn't coming as the forgotten daughter. I was coming as the storm. Stay with me. Because what happened next destroyed their picture-perfect day, shattered their golden daughter's fantasy, and forced my entire family to face the reality they tried so hard to ignore. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about power, truth, and finally taking back what was stolen from you. And by the time the wedding was over, no one looked at me the same again. Let me tell you exactly how it all unfolded. Elena Walker was 26 years old and living in a high-rise apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. By day, she worked as a data analyst for one of the top tech firms in Chicago. By night, she studied code, saved religiously, and enjoyed the quiet reward of a life she had built on her own terms. No one in her family knew just how far she had come, not because she kept it secret out of shame, but because they never asked. And after years of being overlooked, forgotten, and dismissed, she had stopped offering information they didn't want. She was sipping coffee at her glass desk when her father's name lit up on her phone for the 5th time that morning. She didn't move. She didn't even flinch. The screen buzzed once, twice, then stilled. It was followed by an email. Subject line: "Your sister needs you. Last chance." Elena didn't need to read the body of the message to know exactly what it said. She had grown up decoding her father's tone long before she learned to read words on a page. But she read it anyway. "Lily's wedding is the most important event of her life," it read. "Be there or forget about any future support." There was no greeting, no inquiry into her well-being, no hint of acknowledgement that the last time they had spoken, Elena had been 19 and standing at a bus terminal with 2 suitcases and a backpack. Only the same tone that had echoed through her childhood cold, commanding final. Then came the voicemail. Her father's voice filled the room like a storm cloud. "This has gone on long enough, Elena. Your sister's wedding is in 2 weeks. The festivities start this weekend. If you can't put aside whatever bitterness you're holding, don't expect another dime from this family. Your mother is beside herself with worry. Call me. Bitterness. That's what they called it. Not distance. Not survival. Not self-preservation. Bitterness." The truth was simpler. Elena had left their home 7 years ago and hadn't looked back. She hadn't run away in anger, though there was anger, but in quiet resolve. She had known even at 17 that if she stayed, she would slowly disappear. One overlooked test score at a time, one ignored trophy, one forgotten birthday. To them, she had always been the other daughter, the one who followed the rules, cleaned up after herself, and got straight A's without being asked. While Lily, beautiful, dramatic, adored Lily, had basked in every spotlight, even the ones she didn't earn. The last time Elena had come home, Lily was being praised for getting a role as tree number 2 in a middle school play. Elena had just won the state science fair. Her parents forgot to show up. It wasn't personal, she had told herself. It was just the way things were. So she had stopped expecting anything. She had found scholarships, worked nights, tutoring math, forged an acceptance letter to a local community college while quietly accepting admission to Columbia. She'd mapped out her independence like a military operation. And now, years later, she had everything she needed. An apartment, a career, savings, peace. And then this, the message, the voicemail, the veiled threat. Be there or forget about any future support. They still thought she needed them, still believed they held power, Still imagined she was the scared girl they had cornered into staying close to home for Lily's sake, as if her sister's self-worth were more important than her education. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know she'd graduated with honors. They didn't know she made more money than both of them combined. They didn't know she hadn't needed their money for years, and she wasn't about to tell them over the phone. Elena opened her laptop and clicked through to the airline website. The wedding was in 2 weeks. That left plenty of time. She scrolled through ticket options and selected first class, not because she needed the luxury, but because it sent a message. They wanted her home. She would come, not as the quiet daughter, not as the forgotten one, but as the woman they didn't see coming. Her finger hovered over the confirmation button. She clicked and smiled. Let the wedding begin. The small town hadn't changed. The roads were still cracked in the same places they'd been a decade ago, the welcome sign still slightly leaning to the left. But as Elena stepped out of her rental car and stood at the base of her parents' front porch, she knew she had changed. She rang the bell, but the door swung open before it chimed. Her mother stood in the doorway holding a clipboard, eyes scanning her face like she was a stranger. "Elena," she said flatly, "you made it." No hug, no smile, just a quick glance behind her as if checking whether the neighbors had seen her arrive. Inside the house smelled of vanilla candles and something chemical fresh paint maybe. The living room was unrecognizable, buried under piles of tulle ribbon and white cardboard boxes labeled bridesmaid kits and programs to fold. "You can put your bag over there," her mother said, gesturing vaguely toward a corner. "We need help getting the welcome baskets done before 4. Elena hadn't taken off her coat. "I just walked in the door," she replied. Her mother looked up then, just for a second. "Well, now you're here. Be useful." It felt like stepping back into a role she thought she'd outgrown. She'd come prepared for cold shoulders, but not for complete invisibility. Within 5 minutes, she was handed a hot glue gun and a stack of faux pearl trimmings, as if the last 7 years of her life had never happened. Her father appeared an hour later reading glasses perched low, holding a seating chart in one hand and a paper plate in the other. "Good you're settled," he said. "Lily wants to review the table arrangements after dinner. And we need someone to steam the reception linens. No, how was your trip? No, it's good to see you? Just orders." Elena said nothing. She noted how easily they slipped back into treating her like a utility. She could have told them she'd booked a first-class ticket or that she'd left an urgent team meeting with her company's CFO to be here, but what would be the point? She made her way upstairs to the guest room, no longer hers, long since converted into extra storage, and changed into something plain, careful not to wrinkle her travel clothes. When she came back down, Lily had arrived. You could hear her before you saw her. I specifically said, cascading not gathered. Lily's voice floated down the staircase sharp and breathless. "If the florist can't follow simple instructions, maybe we should find another florist." Elena watched as her sister descended in a flurry of chiffon and faux tan phone still pressed to her ear. Lily spotted her, raised a single finger, the universal sign for wait, and continued berating someone on the other end of the call. When she finally hung up, she offered Elena an air kiss near the cheek. "You made it," she said as if surprised. "Thank God. The caterer's threatening to walk and Mom can't figure out the seating chart. This wedding is going to kill me." She didn't ask how Elena had been, didn't notice the tension in her shoulders or the fatigue in her eyes. In this house, Lily's stress eclipsed all else. Elena, their mother, chimed in, appearing behind them. "You'll meet Evan at dinner. He's been such a help. Brilliant with investments. Elena's good with numbers too, aren't you?" Lily added casually, already walking away. "Well, you'll see. He's amazing." Dinner was at 6. Evan arrived precisely on time, bearing an expensive bottle of red and wearing a pressed white shirt that looked made to measure. He was tall, with a polished smile and the kind of handshake meant to impress. "So this is the mysterious sister," he said, locking eyes with Elena. She offered her hand. "Elena. Welcome," he added smoothly with a slight bow of the head. "Lily talks about you all the time. She says you're the quiet one." Elena smiled politely but said nothing. She had met enough men like Evan to know when a performance was underway. Still, she listened. Evan spoke well. Almost too well. He talked about crypto with a level of confidence that bordered on theatrical. Threw around phrases like market velocity and token liquidity with ease. Claimed to be part of a global network of investors with direct pipelines to platforms in Singapore and Zurich. Every few minutes he'd glance toward Charles, who hung on his every word. "He's already helping your dad look at some real estate restructuring," Margaret chimed in over the salad course. "Just brilliant." Elena asked a question, something technical about blockchain protocols. Evan answered, but it was a bit too vague, a little too rehearsed. She leaned back in her chair and watched him talk. Charming, confident, slick, too slick. Lily beamed the entire time. She laughed when Evan made a joke about people still using banks, leaned into his shoulder like a teenage girl with a crush, and recounted how he'd helped Daddy understand crypto in a single afternoon. The room pulsed with shared admiration. Elena once again was the quiet observer, the invisible thread in the fabric of her own family. But this time, something had shifted. She was no longer a girl desperate to be noticed. She was a woman watching a puzzle she didn't yet fully understand, but she could already see the edges starting to come apart. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a space rarely used except for holidays, or in this case, occasions that demanded appearances. Margaret had arranged the table with polished silverware linen napkins folded like swans and wine glasses that caught the chandelier's light just so. It was clear this meal wasn't just about food, it was a stage. Evan took his seat at the head of the table across from Charles, with Lily nestled proudly beside him. Elena was seated to the far end opposite her mother. The seating arrangement wasn't accidental. It never was in this house. The opening courses were quiet save for Lily's usual commentary about table runners and how the photographer was in love with her vision. But by the time the main course arrived, Evan had found his rhythm. It didn't take much prompting. "So Charles and I have been going over a few investment strategies," he began, cutting into his fillet with a practiced hand. "With rates the way they are, and volatility in the public markets, there's incredible upside in decentralized assets if you know where to look." Charles nodded solemnly as if he'd been studying finance his entire life. "He's really opened my eyes. I never realized how old-fashioned traditional banks are." Evan smiled, pleased. "Most people don't. But in Singapore, Zurich, even Dubai, we're seeing accelerated models that make the US look prehistoric. The institutions overseas are already shifting their portfolios. I'm working closely with a group that's offering pre-IPO tokens for a blockchain firm with government partnerships in Asia. Very exclusive." Lily, sipping her wine, leaned forward. "Tell them about the yacht." Evan chuckled. "Well, last month I met with one of our angel investors on his yacht in the Adriatic, only way to talk business without distractions." The table gave a polite laugh. Elena did not. Instead, she picked up her fork, calmly placed it down again, and asked, "Which platform are the tokens being issued on? Ethereum, Solana, or something proprietary?" Evan blinked. "It's a proprietary setup. We've built it on a hybrid framework that optimizes both transaction speed and security." "Interesting," Elena said, voice even. "Hybrid chains can be tricky. What protocol are you using to handle smart contract deployment?" There was a pause. Subtle, but it was there. Evan smiled again, but it took a moment longer to reach his eyes. "It's a layered approach," he said, waving vaguely. "We focus more on strategic outcomes than the technical nitty-gritty. The tech people handle that." Margaret jumped in quickly, sensing a shift. "What matters is that Evan gets results. He's already helped Charles rethink our entire portfolio." "That's true," Charles added. "He's got access to opportunities you won't find on the open market." Elena tilted her head slightly. "Do those opportunities come with regulatory oversight? I assume you have SEC documentation for any domestic capital raised." Evan's jaw twitched almost imperceptibly. "These are private placements, Elena. Not your average 401k stuff." Charles leaned back, setting his fork down harder than necessary. "Is there a point to this line of questioning?" Elena looked at her father. "No point. Just curious." Seems to me like you're being combative, Charles said. Not everyone needs to be interrogated at the dinner table. I wasn't aware asking about financial compliance was combative, Elena replied. You've always had a way of making people uncomfortable, Margaret said with a strained smile. Just let your sister be happy. Evan laughed, light and dismissive. It's fine. I get this a lot. Some people just don't understand what we're building. It's new. Revolutionary ideas always attract skeptics. Lily, visibly irritated, reached for her wine. Why are you doing this? Elena looked at her sister. Doing what? Making it a thing, Lily said. Every time something good happens to me, you find a way to throw shade. Charles pointed his knife toward Elena like it were a baton. That's exactly it. You've always been resentful. It's not Evan's fault you've been struggling. Elena didn't laugh. She didn't flinch. She simply picked up her glass, took a small sip, and let the silence settle. They didn't know. They still thought she was working part-time cobbling together tuition, maybe living with roommates in some drafty apartment. They still believed she was the one who fell short. She had made 6 figures last quarter alone. But saying it out loud would only turn into another accusation bragging ungrateful difficult. So instead she sat with her thoughts. Evan returned to his speech talking about token liquidity and off-market deals that sounded suspiciously vague. He mentioned more cities, Singapore again, a firm in Switzerland, a partner in the Caymans, all impressive if only by virtue of sounding far away. But the pattern was forming. Big words, global locations, no specifics, no documentation. It wasn't the content that bothered Elena, it was the choreography. Evan knew how to impress people like her father, confident tone, bold claims, exotic names. To someone like Charles, that was all it took to feel important. In control. Ahead of the curve. Elena looked around the table. They were mesmerized. Lily's eyes sparkled. Her mother smiled with pride. Her father nodded like he'd just discovered a gold mine. Evan was winning the room and he knew it. And yet in all his polish and precision, something about him didn't add up. Not yet. Not clearly. But Elena felt it. Like the tension before a wire snaps. The quiet note behind the music that doesn't belong. She didn't know what Evan was hiding, but she intended to find out. The next morning, Elena wandered into her father's study while looking for a pen. She had barely slept, her mind too busy replaying the previous night's dinner. Evan's performance, as slick as it was, hadn't satisfied her curiosity. If anything, it had sharpened it. Charles's study was, as she remembered, lined with shelves of unread books and framed certificates of financial courses he had taken at community college decades ago. On the desk sat an open file folder, neatly stacked papers waiting to be signed. She recognized the header immediately, Home Equity Loan Refinance Agreement. Her breath caught. She flipped through the pages carefully, her trained eyes scanning the loan terms. It was recent. Dated just 3 weeks prior. The house, the very same one nearly paid off after 25 years, was now tied to a second mortgage. A significant one. She flipped further. There, scribbled in Charles's tidy cursive, was a note in the margin, per Evan's recommendation, 20% returns projected by Q2. Elena froze. This wasn't just her father dabbling in an investment. He had staked the house on it. The house her mother once swore would be their legacy, all on Evan's word. She replaced the papers exactly where she found them and exited quietly. Downstairs, the wedding madness had resumed. Flower arrangements, catering calls, place card chaos. It was the perfect distraction. Later that afternoon, as she stepped into the backyard for air, she spotted Aunt Diane beside the rose bushes pulling weeds with gloved hands. Elena walked over, partly to escape, partly for clarity. Diane looked up and smiled. "Didn't think we'd see you again, kid." Elena forced a smile. "Family duty." Diane stood brushing dirt from her knees. "Lily's wedding is a production." "You could say that," Elena replied. Diane glanced toward the house, then leaned closer. "You believe in that fiancé of hers?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "You don't—" "I don't know." Diane admitted. He's charming, sure. But something feels off. Last month, a neighbor down in Tampa lost his retirement fund to a guy who talked just like Evan. Crypto this, global that. Promised returns that sounded too good to be real. Elena's pulse quickened. Do you remember the name, she asked? Just bits, Diane said. The guy changed his name a couple of times. But one of the aliases was Edward something. Or Ethan. It wasn't much. But it was enough. That night back in the guest room, Elena powered up her laptop. She no longer needed to pretend. Gone was the obedient daughter. What sat before the screen now was a trained analyst with an advanced degree in data science, a career in fraud detection, and a brain built for pattern recognition. She opened her usual suite of tools: public registries, business databases, social media scrapers, and metadata trackers. It was second nature to her now. The same way an artist sees brushstrokes, she saw digital inconsistencies. She started with the name Evan Cross. Nothing. At least nothing predating 2 years ago. She widened the search. Then she found something curious, an archived engagement announcement from 3 years ago in Colorado. Same face. Different name, Ethan Lewis. She dug deeper. A LinkedIn profile registered under Edward Lambert, now deleted but with remnants cached by the Internet Archive. The profile matched Evan's resume too perfectly: blockchain advisor, investor network, global finance. 3 aliases. Same face, same playbook. And with each identity she noticed the same pattern: appearance, charm, investment pitch, then vanishing after a large financial shift. She pulled the public bankruptcy records for each location tied to the previous names. Each showed an uptick in personal losses from community investors within months of Evan's or Ethan's or Edward's appearance. It was no longer a hunch. It was a pattern. A deliberate, polished operation. And now he had her family in his crosshairs. Elena sat back, heart pounding, but her face calm. She wasn't angry, not yet. This wasn't personal vengeance. It was statistical inevitability. She had seen this before in other cases, just never in her own home. She opened a new file, labeled it Cross Fraud Risk Report V1. Tomorrow she would begin building the case, and this time her family would be forced to listen, whether they wanted to or not. Elena didn't sleep much that night. Her laptop screen had burned its glow into her vision long after she shut it. She kept thinking of the faces behind the data, real people, real losses. And now her sister was standing at the edge of the same trap. The next morning she made a call. It took 3 transfers and a sympathetic dispatcher in Colorado to help her track down one of the names she had found in her late-night search: Karen Delaney. A woman listed in a police report from 3 years ago, tied to a financial disappearance eerily similar to what Elena now suspected. Karen's voice was cautious on the phone. "Who are you again?" "My name is Elena Hart," she said. "You don't know me, but I think the man who nearly ruined your life is about to do the same to my sister." There was a long pause. Then, "Where can we meet?" They sat across from each other at a small table in a quiet cafe just outside of town. Karen looked older than her years, eyes guarded, posture stiff. Her hands trembled slightly as she stirred her coffee. Elena didn't speak first. She let Karen take the time she needed. After several minutes, Karen finally opened her purse and slid over a worn folder. Inside were photographs, bank statements, email printouts, even a faded engagement invitation with the name Edward Lawson printed in gold lettering. Elena blinked. The face on the photo smiled back at her sleek suit, carefully styled hair arm wrapped around Karen's waist. It was unmistakably Evan. Different name, different city. Same man. "We met at a tech conference in Denver." Karen began, voice low but steady. "He said he was building a new crypto platform, something revolutionary. I didn't understand all of it, but he made it sound real. He made me feel like I was part of something big." She looked away for a moment as if ashamed of the memory. "He proposed 6 months later. My family was thrilled. He was charming, helpful, everyone loved him. He convinced my parents to co-sign a loan for our new place. I wired him $60,000 for a pre-investment opportunity he said had to be made fast. 3 days before the wedding, he vanished. Karen lifted her sleeve slightly, revealing a delicate tattoo near her wrist. A date. I got this to remind myself never to ignore red flags again. Elena felt a knot forming in her chest. Did the police find him? They tried, Karen said bitterly. But the money was routed through offshore accounts. No contract, no direct trail. It was ruled a civil matter. Just like that, he was gone. And I was left with debt shame and a mother who still asks what I did wrong. Elena's hands tightened around her coffee cup. I thought I was alone, Karen added quietly. Until you called. You're not, Elena replied. He's using a new name now. Evan Cross. He's engaged to my sister Lily. The wedding is in 5 days. Karen inhaled sharply. 5 days. That's when he disappears. Elena nodded. He's already convinced my father to refinance the house. My mother's retirement fund is in. I need proof. Real proof. Karen reached into the folder again and pulled out a USB stick. I saved everything, even after the police said it wasn't enough. Emails, voicemails, texts. And there are 2 more women I've spoken to over the years. Same pattern, different names. Elena took the drive, her jaw set. Thank you. This changes everything. Karen leaned forward, her voice more forceful now. Your sister won't believe it until it's too late. I didn't. Not when my best friend tried to warn me. Love makes you blind. I don't need her to believe me yet, Elena said. I just need to be ready when everything starts to crack. As she stood to leave, Karen grabbed her wrist. You seem like the kind who keeps her promises, she said. So promise me something. Elena looked her in the eye. Don't let him ruin another life. I won't, Elena whispered. He picked the wrong sister this time. As she stepped out into the cool morning air, the weight of Karen's pain settled over her shoulders. But so did a growing fire. This wasn't just about saving Lily anymore. It was about justice for every woman who had been deceived, every parent who had been tricked, every future that had been stolen. And this time she had the skills, the tools, and now the proof. Evan's perfect game was about to be exposed, and Elena Hart would be the one to do it. The living room felt colder than usual despite the late afternoon sun casting a golden hue across the hardwood floors. Elena stood by the coffee table, her laptop open, a stack of printed documents beside her. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, but her voice remained steady. I need all of you to listen carefully, she said. Charles. Her father sat stiffly on the leather armchair, arms crossed. Margaret hovered near the fireplace, pretending to tidy a flower arrangement that didn't need fixing. Lily was curled up on the sofa, a silk robe draped around her eyes, rimmed with excitement and exhaustion from wedding planning. Evan, the charming fiancé, leaned casually against the wall, swirling a glass of wine, his confidence undisturbed. Elena connected the laptop to the television and brought up a slideshow. The first photo appeared Evan's face, smiling, clean-cut, but under the name Edward Lawson. The room shifted. Then the next, Ethan Lewis, same face, different background, next to another woman in an engagement photo. A bank statement followed showing tens of thousands transferred before a wedding that never happened. Police reports, names of victims, timelines. Each file she displayed built the pattern tighter, more damning. Karen's voice, recorded from their meeting, played through the speakers. He left 3 days before the wedding. Took everything. Elena turned to face them. His name isn't Evan. He's used at least 3 aliases. He's done this before. Every single time he wins, Trust takes the money and disappears. Evan chuckled softly, the sound like nails against a chalkboard. Are you serious? This is a smear campaign. You think I'm some con artist using fake names? That's absurd. He turned to Charles and Margaret, his voice warm, wounded. Sir, ma'am, I love Lily. I'd never do anything to hurt her. This is disgusting. Lily looked stunned. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Her gaze darted between the screen and Evan's face, searching for reassurance. Charles stood up, voice sharp. That's enough, Elena. You've embarrassed yourself and insulted a guest in our home. He's not a guest, Elena said. He's a predator. Margaret stepped forward, her tone clipped. You've always had issues with your sister's happiness. This isn't about Evan. It's about you. What Elena whispered. You've been distant for years, never supportive, and now you come back uninvited and try to ruin her wedding. Her one perfect day. Margaret's voice rose trembling. Lily finally spoke, tears brimming. You were never happy for me, Elena. Never. Every time I achieved something, you made it about you. Why can't you just let me have this? Elena took a step forward. Because he's lying to you. Lily shook her head violently. No, you're lying. Because you can't stand that for once someone picked me, not you. Elena reeled. The words hit harder than she expected. She looked to her father, hoping for something, doubt, consideration, anything. But instead, Charles glared at her with the cold authority of a man convinced. You're just jealous, Elena. Admit it. You've always been jealous that Lily has what you never could charm. Warmth. A family who actually wants her around. The silence that followed was deafening. I make 6 figures, Elena whispered. I've built a life on my own, and none of you ever noticed. That's not the point, Margaret snapped. Family is about showing up, supporting one another, not digging up dirt and waving it around like some kind of victory. Elena stared at them, her mouth open, but words failed her. She wasn't sure what hurt more, their refusal to see the truth or their eagerness to believe the worst of her. Evan Ever, the actor, put an arm around Lily's shoulder. It's okay, babe. Let her have her moment. She clearly needs help. Margaret flinched at that word but said nothing. Lily leaned into him. Elena shut the laptop slowly. I warned you. As she turned to leave, Aunt Diane, who had been silently watching from the doorway, stepped further into the room. Her eyes didn't leave Charles's face. Elena, Diane said quietly, Can I speak to you for a moment? They stepped into the hallway. Diane's voice dropped to a whisper. I believe you. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Diane continued. Charles. He's not telling the whole truth. The refinancing papers you found. He didn't mention them to Margaret. And when I asked him about them yesterday, he got flustered. He's hiding something. Elena's spine straightened. What kind of something I don't know. But he's too invested in Evan. And not just emotionally. Financially. He's got more at stake than he's saying. Elena nodded. Then I need to move faster. She walked out the front door, her heart pounding not with grief this time but with clarity. Her family had chosen comfort over truth. Again. But this time the truth had teeth. And she wasn't done yet. The front door slammed shut behind Elena with a force that echoed down the darkened street. The click of the lock that followed felt louder than anything Charles had ever said to her. She stood motionless on the porch, stunned the warm evening air, unable to fight off the cold that had settled in her chest. It had happened so fast. Charles's face, red with fury, had twisted as he jabbed a finger toward the door. Get out. I don't care where you go, but you will not stay in this house another minute. Margaret had gasped, but said nothing. Lily buried her face in Evan's chest, shaking with tears, not over what had been revealed, but over the disruption Elena had caused. Not one of them had asked if the documents were real. Not one had stopped to consider that she might be telling the truth. The choice had already been made. Now Elena stood with her suitcase beside her, the porch light casting long shadows. She hadn't planned to reveal the truth this way, but she wasn't going to leave like some disgraced child slinking into the night. She turned around, stepped back to the doorway, and knocked once hard. Charles flung open the door. What more could you possibly want? To say what should have been said years ago, Elena replied, her voice calm, but full of steel. Margaret appeared behind him, looking torn, but silent. Lily refused to look at her. You think I came here out of jealousy? Elena said, her gaze locking with her father's. You think I spent nights digging into Evan's past because I couldn't stand seeing Lily in a white dress? No. I came here because, unlike you, I pay attention to what matters. She opened her purse and pulled out her company ID badge, holding it up so they could see. I didn't go to community college. I went to Columbia. Full scholarship. Graduated top of my class in data analytics. She reached into her bag again and held up a letter with the company letterhead, her most recent promotion to senior data strategist. I've been working at one of the most respected tech firms in Chicago since I was 21. I pay my own rent, my own health insurance, and yes, my own student loans because you cut me off when I didn't follow the plan you set for me. Charles's mouth opened, but no sound came. I've been independent since I was 18, she continued, her voice unwavering. Everything I have, I earned. While you were too busy giving Lily applause for showing up, I was out there building a life you never bothered to ask about. She took a step forward. Charles instinctively stepped back. I didn't come here to destroy anything. I came here to protect what little is left. I tried. I tried to warn you before it was too late. You're still leaving, Charles growled, though with less conviction than before. I know, she said. She looked once more at her mother. Margaret's lips quivered, but she said nothing. Then at Lily, who still clung to Evan like he was her last chance at happiness. Evan's face remained unreadable, but his eyes were calculating, already preparing for the next move. Elena drew in a breath. I'm not running away, Dad, she said softly but firmly. I'm walking away, with the truth, and you'll remember that when everything falls apart. She turned and walked back down the steps, her heels striking the concrete like punctuation marks. Each step was a beat of finality. She didn't look back. Not once. The night air felt different this time, sharper, cleaner. She pulled her coat tighter, not against the cold, but against the weight she'd finally shed. The invisible daughter was no longer invisible. Inside that house they would continue spinning illusions for a little while longer. But truth, she knew, had a way of showing up loud, brutal, and undeniable. And when it did, they'd remember the moment she stood at that door, told them who she truly was, and left without asking for anything in return. 3 days before the wedding, Evan disappeared. At first, Margaret assumed he had gone to finalize a surprise for the reception. Charles brushed it off, claiming Evan had mentioned a business meeting. Even Lily tried to excuse it, saying he might be giving her space before the big day. But as the hours ticked by, unanswered calls piled up, and Evan's voicemail changed to an automated service, the illusion began to crack. By the next morning, his phone was off. His hotel suite, booked under a different name, was empty. The front desk confirmed he'd checked out before dawn and had left no forwarding address. Then came the banking alerts. Charles stared at the screen in disbelief. Every cent from their joint wedding account gone. Margaret opened her retirement portal only to find her balance at zero. The mortgage account, refinanced just a few weeks prior, now showed a massive balance due with no sign of repayment. Lily stood frozen in the kitchen as Charles tore open envelope after envelope. Each one confirmed what Elena had tried to warn them about. The trust account Charles had opened to grow wealth through Evan's investment connections. Wiped. The credit cards maxed. The backup savings fund transferred to an untraceable account linked to an LLC in the Cayman Islands. Margaret collapsed onto the couch, a soft moan escaping her lips, as the full scale of the betrayal settled in. Charles clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white, his face pale with disbelief, not just at the theft, but at himself. He had welcomed Evan in, praised him, defended him. And now Evan was gone, just as Elena said he would be. In the hours that followed, reality hit harder. The caterer pulled out after learning the deposit check had bounced. The florist arrived only to remove all arrangements after non-payment. Even the photographer canceled, citing unpaid invoices. Lily's gown, custom-made and already altered, hung limp in the hallway untouched. And amid it all, Lily sat in silence. Her perfectly manicured fingers trembled around her phone, hovering for hours over Elena's contact. By evening, she finally sent the message. I was wrong. Please come home. I need you. No emojis, no punctuation. Just a raw, desperate plea. Elena sat by the window in her Chicago apartment sipping black coffee. The skyline blinked peacefully in the distance. She had seen the news articles first. Then came Aunt Diane's update. Finally, Lily's message stark and heavy. She reread the words again. Please come home. The irony wasn't lost on her. Home had never been a place where she felt seen. And now, with their world in ashes, they called for her. A part of her wanted to ignore it. Let them sit in the consequences of their choices. Let them understand what it meant to discard someone who only ever tried to protect them. But another part, the part that still remembered Lily clinging to her during thunderstorms as children, or their shared giggles over secret chocolate bars hidden under the bed, couldn't quite walk away. Elena set the mug down, not out of pity, not out of forgiveness, but because power didn't always mean revenge. Sometimes it meant being the one person who didn't turn away even when they had. She opened her suitcase and began to pack. Not for a wedding, for the reckoning. The Walker house no longer felt like a home when Elena returned. The front porch, once glowing with bridal decorations, now stood bare. The white ribbons removed, the flowers gone. The wood beneath the banister chipped, where staples had been ripped out in haste. Inside, the silence was heavier than the chaos of wedding preparations had ever been. Her father paced in the living room with the same clipboard he had once wielded as authority, but now it hung limp in his hand. Margaret sat at the dining table, her face pale, lines of worry etching deeper than Elena remembered. Lily was upstairs, her sobs muffled through the floorboards. They had called her back because there was no one else left. Elena placed her briefcase on the coffee table and remained standing. She did not remove her coat, did not sit, did not soften her tone. "I will help you," she said, "but not on your terms. On mine." Charles turned quickly, his eyes bloodshot, desperate, but still laced with pride. "We need immediate funds." "The bank." "No." Elena cut him off. "Not immediate funds, not cash, not a bailout you can squander. Every cent will move through a licensed financial advisor. You will not have direct access. If I step in, it's under professional oversight. Nothing informal, nothing hidden." Her father's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to argue, but Margaret reached over and touched his wrist, silencing him. Elena continued, her voice firm. "This is not a gift. It's not charity. It's a transaction with conditions. And the first condition is this." She pulled a stack of documents from her briefcase, the paper crisp against the still air. "You will sign this acknowledgement. In writing, witnessed, notarized." Charles frowned and reached for the top page, scanning it quickly. His face darkened. "This is nonsense." Elena's voice sharpened. "Read it aloud." Charles slammed the paper back onto the table. Margaret picked it up with trembling hands and read softly. "We, Charles and Margaret Walker, acknowledge that for years we created and maintained an environment of favoritism and emotional neglect, favoring one child over the other." Her eyes lifted to Elena, shame heavy in her expression. "You want us to sign this?" "Yes," Elena said. "Because I will not allow you to rewrite history once you've been rescued. If I help you save this house, save what you have left, then you will put in writing what you denied me for 20 years. You will say it. You will admit it." Charles pushed back his chair so hard it scraped the floor. "You don't dictate terms in this house." Elena leaned forward, her gaze unflinching. "I do, when I'm the one keeping the roof over your head." For a long, brittle silence, no one moved. Then Margaret's voice broke it, quiet, weary, yet carrying more weight than Elena had ever heard before. "Charles! She's right." He spun toward her. "Don't you dare!" "I said she's right," Margaret repeated louder this time. Her hands shook as she set the paper down. "Do you know why I recognized what we were doing to her? Because it was done to me." She lifted her eyes to Elena, and for the first time they brimmed with something that looked like truth. "I was the forgotten one too. My sister was the golden child. My parents poured everything into her. I swore I would never repeat it. And then, I did." Elena's breath caught. She had imagined many things her mother might say in this moment: deflection, excuses, even tears. But not this. Not confession. Margaret pressed her hands together, twisting her wedding ring nervously. I told myself Lily needed more, that she was fragile, that you were strong enough to stand on your own. But really, I was replaying the same script I grew up with. Only this time I was on the other side. Charles stared at her, thunderstruck. His authority, once so absolute, seemed to drain from him. Margaret turned back to Elena. If signing this is what it takes, I will sign, because I won't deny you any longer. Elena looked at her mother, measuring every word. There was sincerity there, but also too many years of silence to erase with one admission. Still, this was something. More than she had ever been given before. She slid the pen across the table. Then sign. Margaret picked it up with trembling fingers. For a moment she hesitated, staring at the space where her name would go. Then she pressed the ink into the paper, her signature flowing across the page. Elena turned to her father. Your turn. Charles's hand hovered, his pride warring with the reality of foreclosure notices and empty accounts. Finally, with a grimace that looked more like defeat than agreement, he scrawled his name. Elena gathered the signed papers and slid them back into her briefcase. Only then did she sit. Good, she said. Now we can begin. But remember, this isn't about trust anymore. That ended when you chose him over me. This is about control. And this time, I have it. No one argued. The balance of power in the Walker family had shifted, and for the first time, Elena wasn't invisible. She was undeniable. The evening stretched heavy inside the Walker living room. The signed papers sat in Elena's briefcase like a silent witness, but she knew a signature alone would not cleanse the past. She looked at her parents, at her sister curled small in the corner of the sofa, and realized the time had come to strip away the last layer of denial. You want to know why I don't believe in your idea of family? Elena said, her voice calm but unwavering. Because for me, family was always a one-way street. She stood, her eyes fixed on Charles and Margaret. Do you remember my 8th birthday? You forgot. Both of you. I sat in the kitchen waiting for cake that never came while you took Lily to her dance recital. You told me later it was an oversight. But when she won nothing more than a participation ribbon, you took her out for ice cream and posted photos as if it were a championship. Margaret's lips parted, but no words came. 9th grade, Elena continued. The science fair. I won first place for analyzing water quality in the county. I stood there holding a ribbon while Principal Davis asked why my parents hadn't shown up. You were at Lily's soccer game. She scored 1 goal. You told that story for weeks. Her mother's hands gripped the edge of her chair, knuckles white. Charles avoided her eyes. High school graduation, Elena said, her voice tightening. You left the ceremony early. Not because of traffic, not because of work, because Lily had a date to prom and you didn't want her to miss the hair appointment. I walked across that stage and looked up to find the seats where you should have been. Empty. The words landed like stones in water, rippling through the silence. No one moved. Elena's voice softened, but the edge of pain remained. Every milestone that mattered to me you erased. Every moment I thought you might notice, you chose her instead. And I let it happen. I told myself I didn't need your approval. But I did. I just stopped admitting it when it hurt too much to hope. She turned to Lily then. Her sister's eyes were glassy, rimmed with mascara smudges. And you, Elena said, you knew Evan wasn't right, didn't you? Lily flinched. For a moment she looked like she might deny it, but something in Elena's stare held her there, pinned. Finally she whispered, I saw things. I knew. Something was off. What things? Elena pressed. Lily swallowed hard. He was secretive about his phone. He changed his story sometimes about where he'd been. He promised money from investments that never showed up in our accounts. I thought maybe I was imagining it. No, Elena said. You thought maybe I was right. and that was unbearable. Because if I was right, then you weren't the chosen one anymore. So you ignored the truth. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. I wanted one thing, just one thing, where I finally had more than you. And if it meant pretending, if it meant looking away, I did. The confession hung in the air like smoke. No one reached to comfort her. No one spoke. Charles leaned back, his face pale, his authority drained. Margaret pressed her hands to her face, her shoulders shaking. The weight of Elena's words. Lily's admission, the collapse of everything they had built on favoritism and illusion. It all pressed down on the room until even the walls seemed to groan with it. Elena stood tall in the center of it, no longer invisible, no longer silenced. She had laid bare the truth, and for once there was no quick rebuttal, no dismissive laugh, no easy defense. The house was quiet except for Lily's sobs and the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. For the first time in years, there was no argument left, no excuse to cling to. Just silence. Heavy. Final. The last wall had fallen, and nothing stood between them and the truth anymore. The days after Lily's confession were strangely quiet. The house no longer hummed with denial, but with the hollow echo of people forced to sit with what they had ignored for too long. Elena thought perhaps that was the end of it. Evan had vanished, his pattern exposed, his grip broken. But predators rarely leave quietly. A week later, she received a letter delivered by courier. Heavy cream paper, bold serif font, legal letterhead. It was addressed not to her family, but directly to her. The message was short, precise, and dripping with arrogance. Cease and desist. It accused her of defamation, libel, and intentional interference with contractual relations. It claimed she had fabricated identities to destroy Evan's reputation and demanded she retract her statements or face a lawsuit for damages exceeding $500,000. Elena read the letter once, then again, her pulse steady. She almost laughed. It was classic Evan twist, the truth weaponize intimidation and count on people folding under pressure. But Elena was not one of his usual marks. She picked up the phone and dialed Vivian Scott, her mentor, the woman who had once guided her through her first corporate fraud investigation, and who knew the law as well as she knew herself. Vivian answered on the second ring. "He's back, isn't he?" she asked without preamble. "Yes," Elena said. "And he wants to sue me." Vivian's voice was calm, steady as stone. "Then we'll answer him with the truth he's so afraid of." That evening, they spread the evidence across Vivian's conference table. Not just the screenshots Elena had collected, but the testimonies Karen had given, the police reports from Colorado, the archived records of Evan's aliases and bank statements that traced his disappearing acts from state to state. Vivian reviewed each document, annotating margins with legal codes and case precedents. "This isn't defamation," she said firmly. "This is exposure. What he doesn't realize is that by filing this threat, he's handed us an opening." Elena leaned forward. "You mean federal?" Vivian nodded. "Interstate fraud, multiple victims, financial institutions involved. This isn't just civil anymore, it's criminal. And the feds don't like men who move stolen money across borders." Within a week, the tone shifted. Evan had intended to scare Elena into silence, but instead he found himself facing inquiries. Letters went out to the women he had scammed before requesting statements. The files Vivian assembled were forwarded to contacts in federal enforcement. The story was no longer about one family's heartbreak. It was about a pattern of theft stretching across 3 states and countless bank accounts. Evan tried to fight back, of course. He sent another letter full of legal jargon and bravado. He called Lily late at night, his voice dripping with false tenderness, insisting Elena was lying, that they were meant to be, that he could still fix everything. But Lily, broken from the wreckage of her own denial, hung up on him. The breaking point came 2 weeks later when federal agents visited the Walker home to ask questions. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Evan's charm had collapsed into a liability, his name now whispered with suspicion rather than awe. He didn't show up to file the lawsuit he had threatened. He didn't appear in court at all. By the time investigators traced the accounts linked to his aliases, Evan Cross, Edward Lawson. Ethan Lewis had already vanished again, fleeing ahead of the net closing in. But this time, it was different. He wasn't disappearing with their money. He was disappearing because he had no other choice. For once, he was the one running. Elena stood outside the courthouse steps with Vivian at her side, the spring air cool against her skin. She wasn't triumphant, not in the shallow sense. There was no joy in watching her sister's heart break or her parents' pride dissolve. But there was justice. Real tangible justice that went beyond family dynamics and personal grudges. Evan's game had been dragged into the light, and light had a way of burning through even the most carefully constructed illusions. Vivian placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," she said. Elena shook her head. "We did it. All of us who refused to stay quiet." She thought of Karen, of the other women who had been too ashamed to speak, of Lily who had ignored the truth until it crushed her, of herself, the invisible daughter who had finally forced everyone to see. Evan was gone. This time not as the victor, but as a fugitive. And Elena knew deep down that was the true end of his story. The City Hall auditorium was filled with warm light and the hum of anticipation. Elena stood at the edge of the stage, a plaque heavy in her hands, her name etched in bold lettering, Community Leadership Award. The applause that washed over her felt different than any recognition she had ever received. It was not forced or obligatory. It was genuine, a chorus of people who saw her for who she was, not for the role she had been forced to play in her family's drama. She smiled as the cameras flashed, but more than that, she felt steady grounded in the life she had built on her own terms. In her acceptance speech, she spoke not of betrayal or revenge, but of visibility. She told the crowd about the countless children who had grown up overlooked their achievements, muted by louder voices, their dreams dismissed as inconvenient. Worth, she said, does not come from those who fail to see us. It grows from within. But sometimes all it takes is one person to say, "I see you," and a life changes forever. The audience rose to their feet, the sound of their clapping echoing in her chest like a promise kept. That night, at a smaller gathering with colleagues and friends, Elena announced the launch of the Visibility Grant, a scholarship for academically gifted students whose accomplishments had gone unnoticed. It would pay for their tuition, housing, and books. It would ensure no one else had to build a secret life in the shadows just to survive. The words tasted right as she spoke them, not just a plan, but a legacy. After the crowd thinned, Aunt Diane approached, her eyes shining with quiet pride. She waited until they were alone before speaking. "You know, Elena," she said softly, "you weren't as alone as you thought." Elena tilted her head, curious. Diane continued, "That first year at Columbia, the scholarship didn't cover everything. You must have wondered how you managed to scrape by." "It was me. I sent the money. Anonymous. I wanted you to have a chance I never had." For a moment, Elena couldn't speak. Her throat tightened, her vision blurred. Diane placed a hand over hers. "I couldn't watch you be buried the way I once was. I saw myself in you, and I wanted to give you the start I never got." Elena squeezed her aunt's hand, gratitude radiating from her chest. She thought of all the nights she had stayed up in her dorm room, calculating every dollar, believing she was utterly on her own. To know now that someone had quietly been in her corner, it changed the shape of her memories, softened the edges. "Thank you," she whispered, and Diane only smiled as if she had been waiting years to hear it. Later, back at her home office, Elena sat with her laptop open, drafting the first announcement for the scholarship fund. The glow of the screen lit her face as she worked, every keystroke a small act of defiance against the silence that had once smothered her. She paused when a new email notification appeared. The subject line read simply, "From Lily." Her chest tightened as she clicked it open. The message was short. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I can't undo what I did. But I wanted you to know I had a daughter. She's healthy, she's beautiful. And I thought, maybe you'd want to meet your niece." Do you? Elena leaned back, staring at the words. For years, her sister had been both rival and wound. Now, here was a bridge extended fragile and trembling. She didn't know if she would cross it, but she knew the choice at last was hers. She rose and moved to the window. Outside, the city stretched in a sprawl of lights vast and alive. Her reflection looked back at her, not the invisible daughter, not the neglected child, but a woman who had reclaimed her own worth. The glass was cool against her fingertips as she whispered to herself, "Steady and certain, I chose freedom. And I do not regret it." So that was Elena's story. The invisible daughter who was forced to her sister's wedding under threat only to return stronger than ever, expose the fraud and reclaim her worth. She walked away with the truth, while her family was left to face the consequences of ignoring her all those years. Some might say she was too cold. Others might say she finally gave them exactly what they deserved. But in the end, Elena chose freedom, and she chose it on her own terms. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in Elena's shoes, would you have done the same? Would you walk away and let them learn the hard way, or would you stay to repair what was broken? Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories like this, filled with drama, betrayal, and justice, served in the most unexpected ways. And share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. Your perspective might just shape the next story we tell.